Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to GEEXX Watch. Today I'm going to talk about Wednesday Addams Season 2, which I literally just finished watching a short while ago. So, 8 episodes. I'm going to keep spoilers to a minimum. Just going to give a brief overview of stuff that's happening, and then talk about how I feel about the series, the second season, I mean. So, Wednesday is going back to her second year in Nevermore. This time Pugsley is joining her. There's a new principal, Principal Dort, who is played by Steve Buscemi. And if you've seen the memes of Steve Buscemi like dressing up like a teenager with a skateboard and going, "Hey youths, how's it going?" It's that type of character. He's kind of playing that meme a bit to a hilt. As usual, there are some murders, some deaths, something to do with ravens. Pugsley makes a new friend. Wednesday Addams has a stalker. There are a lot of plot lines. You know, there's stuff going on with Enid, stuff going on with Wednesday Stalker, the Ravens, the new principal, Pugsley's friend. You know, there's multiple plot lines going on. Much more so than in the first season. Gomez and Morticia are more prominent this season. We see more of them. We are also eventually introduced to Grandmama, not the Grandmama we are used to. The only one we've seen previously is Gomez and Uncle Fester's grandmother, Grandmama Addams. This is Grandmama Broom, I think. Crumb. I can't just finish. I'm just drawing a blank. This is Morticia's mother, who shares a lot in common with Wednesday, although she's not quite as dour and monotone. She does share the her sense of the macabre and general, you know, dislike of humanity in general. She revels in the misery of others. So that's a kind of a brief overview of things that might be going on. Overall, I think it was a good season, but I do think there were too many plot lines. As I mentioned, there was a lot of them, and I may have forgotten one or two things since I'm improvising as I go. But I felt that the individual plot lines resolved themselves very quickly. You know, like I said, there's Wednesday Stalker, there's the Ravens, there's other stuff going on, but like, you know, they'll pick one of them to resolve. Like one of them resolves like in like a second or third episode, and then another one resolves in the immediately after episode. There's only 8 episodes in the season, and there's like half a dozen different plot lines. So, you know, they're kind of like back-to-back resolutions. Okay, we tie off this plot line, then we tie off this plot line, then we tie off this plot line. So it's like there's so much going on that they have to resolve them on top of each other. So there's not a lot of time to breathe in between them. There's also not as much time for setup. I mean, the storylines that resolve later in the season definitely get more setup, but the ones that resolve early, you know, they seem to have large importance, but then they're kind of over and done with, you know. And I think one of the things that's resolved early is interesting. But beyond that, I think the other ones are just kind of, they finish them and then we're done with it. You know, it's like, okay, we finished this thing. Now we don't need to think about it anymore and it's done. So that's one of my main real complaints with the second season. I mean, other than that, I really, really enjoyed the episodes. You know, we get to see Uncle Fester a bit. Another thing that I really didn't like, and I spoke about this in this first season, is that it changes tone very rapidly. You know, it goes from being, you know, like teen angst to goofy, macabre Adams to truly gruesome. And there are times when that tonal shift is not smooth. You know, it's so I felt the show was totally the season was totally tonally inconsistent in a way. Not necessarily inconsistent, but that it the tones didn't shift properly, in my opinion. Again, this is my opinion. I did mention teen angst, teen melodrama, and I think some of that was written very, very well, but personally, I despise it. You know, at my age, I've seen so much teenage drama that I'm just sick of it. And I have mentioned this previously in other things. I mentioned it when I reviewed season one. I know I mentioned it when I reviewed, when I spoke about Invincible. And I may have spoken about it with other things too, but yeah, the teen angst, which is personal, not really knocking the quality, the inconsistent tonal shifts, or the not well executed tonal shifts, in my opinion, and the way the plot points resolved. Those are my main criticisms of season two. I still give it a solid B plus. You know, it's very entertaining. There were times I just kind of, you know, laughed out loud, and I've always loved the Addams Family. I've loved the Addams Family. I was younger than 10 when I was watching the old black and white Addams Family shows on TV, with the original television cast, and I loved it. So I have always, and I also remember seeing the cartoons in newspapers and magazines. You know, the original cartoons drawn by Charles Addams. So I have loved the Addams Family for almost as long as I can remember, and I've loved almost every iteration of them too. Some I've loved more than others. I'm not sure where I put this in my love of them. The Addams Family movies with Raul Julia and Angelica Houston, those remain my favorites. Those are my favorite depictions. But these come pretty close behind. You know, I think these tie with the original TV series. The original TV series was more goofy, less gruesome, but it's got a special place in my heart. So it's hard to let that go. I do think it does a semi-decent job of character development. I will say the relationship between Enid and Wednesday has evolved well. You know, I think Wednesday's behavior is inconsistent, shifting between concern for her friends that she denies, and and the Wednesday we've all come to know and love, the cold, heartless, cadaver that she is. But they're still roommates, and I think that their relationship has progressed to the point where they acknowledge their differences, and if they don't embrace them, they accept them. You know, Enid is still a super bubbly, perky werewolf that she has always been, but she also acknowledges that she knows that that's not who Wednesday is. You know, she is accepting of who Wednesday is, and tries to make accommodations for that. You know, she doesn't necessarily change who she is, but she's like, okay, I know Wednesday only put up with this for so long, so I'll try and she knows when to shut it off, or at least pull back, and give Wednesday the space she needs to breathe. At the same time, Wednesday knows that, Enid is who she is, and knows that she's going to be bubbly and effervescent and talkative and chatty, and tries to at least acknowledge that, she can't change who Enid is, and she tries to at least fit that into a box she can deal with. It's like, okay, I know you're going to do this thing, but do it this way so I don't want to rip your throat out, kind of thing. She kind of tries to direct Enid's behavior towards something that she can more easily tolerate and put up with. She does tolerate Enid's behavior better, I think. So yeah, their relationship has evolved, and I do appreciate that. I think it speaks well to the writing, and it speaks well to the actresses to be able to portray that. Speaking of the actresses portraying and dealing with each other, there is I don't want to spoil it. Something I would talk about if I didn't want to spoil it, but yeah, there is at least one episode where the two of them, their interactions are very, very well done. You'll know what that episode is if you've seen it, and if you haven't seen it, you'll figure it out when you get there. But yeah, this was a solid season. There was some teasing, there were still some plot points left open for a season 3. I think I've read that season 3 has been greenlit. They're supposed to start filming in 2006 sometime. I am eagerly awaiting season 3. I think, personal opinion, based on what I know so far of how the story has progressed, I think they should stop at season 3, just because I don't see how they could do more with this as it's going. I'm not a writer. They could be very creative and come up with enough for another 3 or 4 seasons. But based on what I know of the storyline so far and what they've teased for next season, I don't think they can do this indefinitely. I don't think they should. I think that, you need to know when it's time to call it quits and move on to something else. I'll let someone else take the reins. So I am eagerly waiting season 3. Season 2 was pretty damn good. And I rambled on long enough. As always, thanks for watching. As always, my stuff is crap. And until next time, good hunting.